The United Nations Secretary General is trying to set the record straight about comments he made on the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
I am shocked by the misrepresentations by some of my statement yesterday in the Security Council, as if I was justifying acts of terror by Hamas. This is false. It was the opposite. Indeed, I spoke of the grievances of the Palestinian people. And in doing so, I also clearly stated, and I quote, "But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas," end quote.
This comes after Israel took offense from Antonio Guterres' comments and called for his resignation. The country also said it will stop issuing visas to UN personnel to, quote, teach them a lesson. Francesca Albanese is the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian Territories, and she joins me now. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, David.
Clearly, this is a time where delicate diplomacy is of utmost importance. How is this tension between Israel and the UN Secretary General complicating your role as Special Rapporteur in Palestine?
Well, my role as a Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian Territory has always been sensitive. For many years, Israel doesn't recognize this mandate. And so for many years, nearly 16 or 17 years, it has not allowed anyone holding this mandate to enter the occupied Palestinian territory, although technically, legally, Israel doesn't have the authority to do so. But again, abuse of power, it's pretty common and standard in the occupied Palestinian territory at the hand of the occupying power, Israel. So is it going to complicate my work more? I do not think so, but it's going to have an impact on the UN. On the UN as a whole. I mean, it's inconceivable that such a language can be used against the UN Secretary General, because I find he's been extremely balanced. And also, I mean, I've been quite critical in the first days of this crisis, saying the UN needs to call for a ceasefire. And even when the Secretary General has done so, he has always used words of compassion and solidarity with Israeli people, and rightly so, because they really have been affected in a way that is unprecedented, and I mean in the history of Israel. So everyone is shocked for what they have endured and are enduring. And at the same time, I agree with the Secretary General. This didn't happen in a vacuum. And people like me and my predecessors and the human rights community, both Israeli and Palestinians and others, have warned for years that this was leading the continuous impunity, the continuous violations committed by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory were leading, left unaddressed, would lead to a disaster, to a catastrophe. And this is exactly what's happening.
So on this current situation, there is a pretty unanimous call from humanitarian groups around the world of the need for greater access to food, water, medicine, and fuel. There is the rebuttal from Israel and its backers that the security of Israel is of profound importance here as well, and that you can't send some of these supplies into Gaza because Hamas will take them and use them and resupply and rearm, and the civilians will be no better off. How do you bridge these seemingly intractable positions in this moment?
Well, there are two elements here. First of all, this is the same government than 3 months ago, I mean, there was an Israeli minister who said that Hamas was an asset for Israel, while the PA was a liability. This is on record. So look, this is very critical. And I understand how threatening has been the attack that Israel has received from Hamas. This nothing justifies, nothing condones, nothing is to downplay what Hamas has done. At the same time, Israel's self-defense, if this is the argument, is justified to repel the attack. The attack was repelled in 48 hours. The rockets have to be dealt with, no issue. But what's the point of bombarding an entire population, 2.2 million people, half of whom are children? And there are already almost 6,000 people who have been killed in this war alone. How is this going to bring more security for the Israelis? And how is it ever legal to kill so many civilians, to destroy 42% of the housing infrastructure, to bomb hospitals, schools, markets, to level entire residential areas? And let me say something concerning the humanitarian aid, and thank you for raising this important concept. Intentionally starving a population who's been under an unlawful blockade for 16 years, because let's not forget the occupation had turned Gaza into a blockade since 2007, and tightening it, increasing the restriction can amount to a war crime. To a crime against humanity. It's already a war crime as a collective punishment, and can be, if proven intentional, and it's intentional, according to Israeli leaders, it's a crimes against humanity. It's extremely serious.
So to go back to your point that they had repelled the attackers, in the early days of this, and please do not take this question as in any way minimizing what is happening to civilians in Gaza. That is a tragedy in its own. Israel would argue the threat is not neutralized; it is merely repelled. So the Hamas went back inside Gaza to its tunnels and to its systems, but they're still there, and it could happen again. And its stated intention is to take action so that it never happens again. So how do we? This whole thing challenges us in many ways, right? So how do we balance this, with Israel's desire for security of its people versus what's happening?
I'm very fine with the question, but I have to correct you on one thing.
Sure.
Killing a soldier or killing a combatant is a tragedy. Killing civilians is a crime, and is a war crime. And this is to be very, very clear. Now, the declared objective has not been to dismantle Hamas's military capacity, which is a very specific military target. Mm-hmm. And therefore, when you invoke Article 51 of the UN Security Council, you need to present a plan on how you intend to use your self-defense. What Israel is doing is much broader than self-defense, because on the one hand, all the Palestinians in Gaza have been called human animals. They have all been associated with what Hamas is doing, and they are being punished for what Hamas has done. So, first of all, what's happening is in violation of all principles of international law, distinction, proportionality, and precaution. So, but then also, how is Hamas, which has a military wing, but it's also a political entity, how is it going to be eradicated or annihilated? Yeah. This is something that should be asked to the Israelis, because what they are doing right now is they're killing civilians. I'm sorry, this is more than a tragedy. And there are 800 renowned scholars who have raised the alarm, saying, like 2,000 lives ago, meaning when the death toll had reached 3,000 or 4,000, they said, this can be genocide. And it's very serious. And it has never been used with such a strength and signed. This letter was signed by 800 scholars. It's very serious what's going on in Gaza. And I'm shocked. As a special rapporteur, I'm shocked that a ceasefire has not been declared yet.
Well, sorry, I was going to say the push now, started by the U.S., I think in some ways, is for what they call humanitarian pauses, right? Temporary stops in the fighting so aid can get in, though it is unclear to me how likely that is to happen quickly enough for the aid to get in at scale, right? Certainly given what's going on. But I just wonder, as a final point, in your position, given the deteriorating relationship between the United Nations writ large and the government of Israel right now, what do you want to see the UN do next to get to this point where some sort of humanitarian relief can happen?
Look, it's very, I understand the sensitivities, but here we need to rise above emotions. And this is what the UN should be doing. Strong words have been used, but I think that the UN remains responsible under the UN Charter to ensure peace and security. And again, I think it's very important what the Secretary General said. I mean, nothing justifies what Hamas has done. The grievances of the Palestinian people cannot amount to this. And I think that there is no way that the Palestinian people and the grievances of the Palestinian people should be associated with it, because the Palestinians have been protesting peacefully and embracing peaceful resistance, meaning non-armed resistance, for 20, 30 years now. And nothing has come to them. It doesn't matter. They continue to engage, most of them in peaceful resistance. So the role of the UN should be to maintain peace and security, to ensure peace and security. And what Israel is doing is exactly threatening peace and security in the region, because all of a sudden, all Arab countries are getting inflamed by, there is on the one hand, the shock of the people who see the Palestinians being massacred. And there are also Israelis who have been massacred this time. And so this is unacceptable. But also there is a very violent rhetoric being used, which is extremely dehumanizing and resonates with people in the region, and also threats posed to other countries in the region. So it risks to escalate in a very serious fashion. So I think this is time to consider some coercive measures to calm down and to de-escalate the situation.
We are out of time, but I want to thank you for your time. Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian Territories. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Bye.